Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Uh, I'm Ashley Austin, and you are all here for Neuro-Informed Strategies for Enhancing Safety, Attachment, and Resilience. So welcome. This is the fifth in our series, so we're really excited about this. This is the final episode of this particular series, so happy to have everybody here. I'm going to go ahead and move us in. I know lots going on at this time of year, so really happy folks were able to join. Um, the goal of our series has been to really advance our skills regarding therapeutic effectiveness and client outcomes within a trauma responsive context. Our last webinar was focused on helping clients notice, name, tolerate, and regulate emotions. That webinar is listed on our website. Stay tuned because we're going to launch the next, I think, 4 webinars beginning in, I guess, what we academics call spring, but I think most people call it winter. So like in the January, February era. And this series is really meant to be part of our both our DSW and our MSW trauma informed curriculum. Our DSW program in particular is really aimed at building advanced trauma responsive professionals, social work professionals who are engaged in leadership, clinical practice, and advocacy. You can scan that little QR code to learn more about our program and see about sort of joining our DSW team if you're interested. I'm going to briefly introduce myself and then turn it over to my co-presenter. Today, if you've watched any of our previous webinars, we often do like sort of one per person. And today we're sort of toggling back and forth. And so we'll see how that goes. Both of us had internet problems. So I'm not sure that like having 2 presenters is going to solve anything today. So I'm Dr. Ashley Austin, a professor here at Barry University, teach in a range of the classes. I teach a lot of the DSW program. I am an EMDRIA certified EMDR therapist. I work primarily with trans and non-binary clients. And I think it's extra important to note that today, November 20th, is the Trans Day of Remembrance, and it's the 25th anniversary. Really important day to recognize a lot of the harm and trauma affecting the trans community, those who have been lost to brutalization, and those living and facing a lot of the challenges in our world and doing so with a lot of resilience. And so this is an important day and important work. While that is my population, I work with that population in a range of ways. In addition to being trans affirmative, I do a lot of EMDR work, affirmative CBT, engage in a lot of the practices we talk about here, very trauma responsive practices related to mindfulness, self-compassion, breath work, somatics, all of that good stuff. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Williams so she can introduce herself.
Thanks, Ashley. Yeah. I'm been at Barry for about 16 years and in clinical practice for over 26 years. My area of practice is neuro-informed, really, neuro-responsive, trauma-focused interventions. I do have a clinical practice where I also focus on anxiety, depression, and trauma. I've written a couple of courses at the graduate level with neurobiology and trauma focused interventions, as well as at the doctorate level. So, thanks.
Thanks, Jennifer. You'll be hearing from both of us today, which is it should be fun. I'm gonna briefly, let me see, it might be Jennifer that's kicking off. I can talk about the objectives, and I think Jennifer's going to actually launch and do the first part. So today what we're going to do is focus on this really sort of interpersonal neurobiology, which those of you who are familiar, it might be part of your practice. Those of you who are not, hopefully you'll learn a bit more about sort of the theoretical underpinnings and the conceptual underpinnings. And then we're going to do a lot of practice, talking about some case examples, and then maybe doing a little practice ourselves. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Williams, who's going to kick us off today.
Thanks so much. So we'll just go to that next piece. Perfect. So As we start off all of the webinars, we talk about who are the scholars that really inspire our discussion. And both Ashley and I will sort of talk about it within each of our particular areas. But in particular, when we talk about interpersonal neurobiology, we'll talk about that in just a moment. Dan Siegel is the person that really coined that term. So we'll talk about that in just a second. And then two other people, Rebecca Case and Laurel Parnell, have inspired what we're presenting to you in terms of these neuro-informed strategies this afternoon. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So let's talk about what interpersonal neurobiology really is. As I said before, it was a term coined by Dan Siegel. And he coined this term as a way to explore the way that the brain changes through its experience as it interacts with the environment, as it interacts with other beings, interpersonal relationships. So the actual definition, and I have that on here, is that it is a multidisciplinary framework. Um, multi, so multiple disciplines come together: neuroscience, psychology, biology, and they all come together and integrate. It's not just sort of like come together and let's chat. They're all integrated to understand specifically how relationships and the brain interact. And so this is really different for those of you who are somewhat familiar with neurobiology and how it interacts and informs our clinical work. This specifically is just looking at how neuroscience and psychology and biology and a few other pieces interact with relationships and the brain. Okay. And what it really does is it emphasizes specifically this profound connection that we have between our minds and our bodies and with each other. Okay. Um, I think it's important for us to note why it's important for our trauma work. We know that trauma is fundamentally interpersonal, right? Many times our clients come to us with ruptures in their relationships or with how it sort of impacts how we connect with other people. So, by focusing on interpersonal neurobiology, it helps us to focus on healing through connection. It helps us to heal through having feeling safe. And when we're able to do that, we can then foster what's called secure attachment. Now, one more thing that I just want to say for those of you who are familiar with Dan Siegel, you might also be familiar with Louis Cozzolino. And they talk about interpersonal neurobiology, but also by recognizing that we have a social brain, that our brains are wired to connect with one another. We do have something called a mirror neuron system. And that mirror neuron system is what helps us to resonate with other people. Some people call that co-regulation, right? Especially when we're in the therapy room, when we're in therapy. And when we're able to co regulate, when we're able to be with others, that helps to support another person's nervous system. So that's why we're using interpersonal neurobiology and talking about this as the foundation, because that interplay is that interplay between relationships and neurobiology. That's what we're telling you is absolutely central to promote healing with our clients. So I have a question for you folks. And you don't just let's just think about it. How do you see relationships playing a role in the therapeutic process? So just think about this for a second. How do you see relationships playing a role in the therapeutic process? And I'm going to say, I'm going to ask you folks to dive a little deeper than what we sort of got in graduate school, right? Gaining rapport, why that's important. Just think about it a little deeper about how you see that playing a role in that process. Just something to think about. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Perfect. So, as you think about that question, let's go a little deeper. Let's take a moment to review why understanding the nervous system is key to healing. And what I'm saying here is understanding the nervous system is key to healing because it creates new neural patterns in our brain. And that's a really important part of the healing process. It's crucial. It's a crucial concept in trauma work. But, folks, it is often misunderstood. So, there is a common misconception. And that common misconception is that the primary goal of trauma therapy is to always reprocess traumatic memories, right? We have to reprocess that to integrate. And what we know is that while reprocessing can be really valuable and a very transformative part of healing for many of our clients, it's really important, folks, to recognize it's not always appropriate or necessary in every situation. So for some of our clients, diving really directly into their trauma, that can feel really overwhelming. That can feel unsafe. Think about that. Think about the clients that you've had. It depends on where they're at. That's why it's so important to do a really in-depth assessment and find out where they're at, because if we dive too deeply into their trauma and it's not safe, we're not able to help them. This is a very important component of starting where the clients are at. Then there's others that their nervous system may lack that regulation. It may lack the stabilization that's needed to really effectively really engage in that reprocessing. So, in those cases, folks, we need to first focus on creating a sense of safety and stability. That is essential. And to my last key point there, this is where neuroflexibility becomes a key focus. All right. So let me just tell you what neuroflexibility is. If you've heard of neuroplasticity, it'll seem a little bit familiar. It refers to the brain's ability to adapt, to shift, and to create new pathways for experiencing the world. It allows us, folks, to move from more from fixed patterns that we have of fear, of shame, of hopelessness. And what that neural flexibility allows us to do is it moves us from that to what we call more adaptive states. And those more adaptive states are things like regulation, connection, and resilience. Um, so I just want to really, really highlight that neuroflexibility in itself, and I really want to highlight this and set this as the foundation for this webinar. Neuroflexibility in itself is healing. Neuroflexibility in itself is healing. When we help clients strengthen those positive neural pathways, we're doing so much more than just managing symptoms. We are enhancing their capacity for regulation. We're enhancing their ability to be able to bounce back from adversity, and help them to have a belief in themselves, their own self-efficacy. So when we do this intentionally, we create those intentional experiences that they feel safe and empowered. That's when we're able to anchor experiences in their nervous system. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit more about. Thanks. All right. So let's talk about how trauma shapes the nervous system, um, and how. It shapes relationships. As I said, trauma has a profound impact on the nervous system, right? And it can impact the way that we look at and navigate through our relationships. So let's look just for a moment at how specifically that happens. First, trauma just disrupts the brain's ability to regulate the autonomic nervous system. That autonomic nervous system is the system that governs what we're all familiar with the fight, flight, freeze, shutdown responses, right? So when a client's in that fight or flight state, you might notice hyperarousal. And in hyperarousal, that's where we might start to see our client is manifesting as irritability or hypervigilance or anxiety. And then we have on the other hand, that freeze or shutdown response that could lead to hypoarousal, which can look like dissociation, exhaustion, and even numbness. So, when trauma is unresolved or unintegrated, and for those of you who are familiar with polyvagal theory, go take a look at what we've talked about with that before. We see that clients can get stuck in those survival states. And we see that they can cycle through dysregulation rather than returning to what's called that homeostasis, a state of balance and calm. All right. So there's that first piece. That's trauma and the nervous system. Now, let's look at attachment and trauma. We know that early attachment experiences, especially those folks during our infancy and our childhood, we know that early attachment experiences are foundational to how our nervous system develops. We know that secure attachment fosters resilience, right? It teaches us that we can rely on others. It teaches us that we can rely on ourselves. But when there are attachment wounds, things like neglect and abuse, that can leave lasting imprints. That can lead to patterns of avoidance, of fear. It can even lead to over dependence in relationships. So these wounds create belief systems about ourselves. They create belief systems about others. So oftentimes we'll see belief systems like, for those of you who do EMDR, negative core beliefs, things like I'm unworthy or it's not safe to trust others. Others can't be trusted. So that's also why the need for safety is critical. Trauma shakes our internal sense of safety. And that can make us or make our clients perceive even the most neutral situations as threatening. So healing begins when we help clients bring forward, cultivate a real felt sense in the body. That's when we say felt sense, a real in the body sense of safety. It's not just up here. It's not just cognitive, but it's in the body, right? Vanderkolk says body keeps the score. Boy, do we know that to be true. So, healing happens when we help our clients to really bring forward that felt sense of safety within their body and then also within relationship. Why is that so important? Because safety is the gateway. It allows clients to then access their higher brain functions, the prefrontal cortex. When we feel safe and calm, that prefrontal cortex is online. And when that prefrontal cortex is online, guess what? We can use it. That's when we can regulate our emotions. That's when we can actually sit back and have self reflection and go, maybe if I say that one thing, that's not going to make my partner feel so good. I'm angry, but I think I can find a better way of saying this to them. Those higher brain functions impact our learning. And that learning is essential for growth and for healing. All right. So that's why we needed to go over this foundation here first. So you can just take a look at, if we don't have that foundation, our clients could potentially remain stuck in that survival mode. So think about this. When we're working with clients, what signs of nervous system dysregulation? I'm saying these words on purpose because I want to invite you to use that kind of language, especially for those of you clinicians who've been practicing for a while. When you're working with your clients, what are those signs of nervous system dysregulation that you've observed? So think about that for a second. Let me show you what it was like when working with a client that I call Alex. So let's just dive into this for a second. I worked with Alex, who's a 25-year-old college graduate who came to therapy looking for help with really chronic anxiety. He had constant restlessness. He had difficulty concentrating, um, irritability, difficulty sleeping, right? So sleepless nights because he was often thinking, had racing thoughts about his work performance. Um, he received great feedback at work and was really doing well at work, was told that he was doing well at work, but he sort of struggled with what we call that imposter syndrome, right? Believing that he was just on the brink of failure. So one of the things that we did in the beginning, in the early sessions, when I say we, it was me, he and I worked together. Our focus wasn't on the why of Alex's anxiety, but we began with helping him to regulate his nervous system. I needed him to start to first feel safe in his body because he came in already telling me, I don't feel safe in my body. And here it's as evidenced by blah, 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 blah. So, first, we've got to do simple grounding exercises. And that's what I did. I introduced him to something called the 4-7-8 breath. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7, exhale through the mouth for 8. My clients really like that one. It's simple. It doesn't matter how fast it is as long as each number is the same. So you don't want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2. You don't do it that way, right? So inhale through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Once we did that, I did a body scan with him and I helped him to start to really make a connection to his body, to really notice those physical symptoms that he was experiencing once he started to feel somewhat calm and safe, so that he could identify those physical sensations without any sort of judgment and start to allow himself to become more present in his body in the moment. Some might identify that as a very mindfulness approach, and it is. It is a tool. But this particular tool really helped him to self regulate. I then went into the whole education on the nervous system with him. I talked about the science of anxiety. I talked about what happens to the body, why the body's natural response to those perceived threats is what it is, even when the threat is not real. I introduced him to the window of tolerance. If you're interested in that, we have a whole webinar on the window of tolerance. Talk to him about hyperarousal, hypoarousal. And the goal for Alex was for him to learn how to stay within his window of tolerance, where regulation and reflection is possible at the same time. And through that, we were then able to shift focus to notice that those moments of calm and safety Notice those even when he was feeling dysregulated. And that helped him to shift perspective. Okay. So what's next? So that's the groundwork. Okay, that's sort of the basic fast forward groundwork that we've laid for discussing how trauma impacts the nervous system and attachment and safety. So next, Ashley's going to guide us through some of these neural exercises that will help us to um, to foster dual awareness and enhance safety.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was super helpful. And so Jennifer just presented all of that, and I want you to think about that the sort of rationale behind all of it as we go into these different exercises. So the first one we're going to start with, and I think there's just lots of different examples, but we have pulled up a few to try to sort of make this feel like, okay, great. I love the rationale. I love the science. Like, what might it look like in practice? So we came up with some that we've experienced and want to give you a couple examples of what it has looked like in practice. So I'll start with this first piece is this idea of, and Jennifer mentioned it, this internal sense of safety, this felt sense of safety. Jennifer mentioned tuning into the nervous system of your clients. And I'll say, yeah, how about starting this in these initial, like number one session with your client? And let's think about how often in our minds we are really thinking about our clients' nervous systems the first time we meet them. If you were like Jennifer and I and were raised a long time ago, and Jennifer and I have a weird parallel like history in our trajectories. We've been in 3 different jobs accidentally in the same, like all of our jobs together accidentally for the last, I don't know, 20 something years, I think, oddly. Um, and so it's this interesting thing. Of course, we were not taught this. So when Jennifer and I first started seeing clients, we were never thinking about their nervous systems. That was not a conversation that ever happened in master's programs in anywhere, that I can think of back then, right? And so that's not what we were doing. And a lot of us, like Jennifer said, if you were raised like we were and taught that way, maybe you're like, well, yeah, no one's taught me still. And so hopefully we're sort of adding to that. Some of you are in the beginnings of learning and you're starting to say like, okay, people have talked about it, but what is it? So in the initial sessions, what I want to ask you is like, first of all, what might your clients be experiencing in their first session? Just think about the clients you serve and think about the things they might be experiencing when they come to session. Some of you might work with court-mandated clients or clients who are at risk of losing their children. I work with lots of clients who had very, very rough experiences with clinicians in the past and or doctors and healthcare professionals, really, really uncomfortable and sometimes really traumatizing conversations in therapy. So they're coming to me with that history. People who've never been to therapy before, or it's not consistent with the way their families raised them to think about healing or growth or who you should talk to and when, have a lot of uncertainty or fear or confusion. Thinking about all of that, what might someone's nervous system look like and feel like and show up like when that's what they're entering your therapeutic space with that, whether it's a Zoom space or an office. So we really want you to tune into that because that, no matter if we're smiling or not, all that's going on. And I can say for years, missed the boat on that one, didn't tune into it. What we're saying now is, guess what? We know what we know now. Thank you, lots of teachers that came before us to teach us that this is the perfect time for us to tune into their nervous systems and to help the clients begin to tune into their own nervous system. I'm going to give you an example of one of my clients. And this is when I got it right, because I can think of a client like this years before that I missed that opportunity. This was an initial client who came into the session. She was someone who was sort of beginning to identify as trans. She wanted to understand her gender identity and her gender dysphoria. Anybody who's ever worked with trans clients, the initial session for trans clients at this early phase can be really, really scary. Often I'm the first person they've ever spoken these words to out loud or face-to-face or verbally, so it's a lot. She had had therapy in the past for anxiety and depression, but had never discussed any of these other thoughts or feelings with another person, and certainly not with a therapist. She came racing, and this was physical space, came racing into a physical office space, heavy breathing, speaking fast, apologizing over and over for being late, sharing how horrible the traffic was, like looking really visibly stressed, like she was overwhelmed. So I reassured her, like, it's okay. The traffic in South Florida is the worst. Like, we can all empathize and validate. But instead of leaving it here, which I think in the past, before I understood that it wasn't about the mind and our thoughts and our feelings only, that it's about our mind body, our nervous systems, all of us, whole body, I would have left it there. Now I don't. So we spent time in this very first session regulating her nervous system to bring about this felt sense of safety before we moved into anything else. So we sort of started to bring mindful attention to what was going on with her. So how this stress was showing up for her. So we sort of notice, like, oh gosh, I can see that traffic was so rough. I can see, like, oh, you're still coming down from it. I can see it's like your leg is jittery. Ooh, still kind of hard to breathe. And we were sort of noticing, and she was then noticing, instead of being so sort of consumed with me and what I thought of her, she was able to sort of tune inward and be like, oh yeah, like I am. Oh yeah, like even sweating a little and just giving her, so we said, oh, like, let's slow it down. So taking a couple breaths, I said, can I get you some water? And she was like, oh my God, yes. Right. So I was able to get her a little bottle of water, and she was able to drink. And while she drank, I didn't speak. I just let her drink and allowed the water to sort of soothe her, allowed her body to settle. She had a visible sigh and sort of settled in a little. I was like, okay, starting to calm down from that. It can take a lot to calm down from that traffic and that race to get here, especially when you don't know what you're getting into. Kind of just notice, you're here, that's behind you. Kind of let go of everything that it took to get you here. Acknowledge it, sort of notice it, and notice that's, we can leave that behind and we're here, and sort of kind of take a second to orient yourself, check out the office, sort of see if you can get comfy, and gave her that time and space to sort of settle in, as long as it took, right? As long as it took. I could see the shift in her. And then I checked in. Looks like you're starting to calm down a little bit. Does this feel a little calmer? Yeah. Yes, I feel so much better than when I walked in. Okay. And then, right, so then I can get into establishing safety of who I am as a trans affirming therapist, and all these sort of, hopefully the expertise and my knowledge that I hope can help her move through her journey, and my support. But before I could launch into that verbal stuff, she needed to be calm enough to even be able to hear it and take it in with her thinking brain. In the past, I'm pretty sure, before I understood this, I would have done my spiel trying to reassure her of who I was and what I do, and missed the fact that she was not even online enough to get it. She was still sort of in that traffic and feeling like she messed up by coming late, and really stuck there. And her body was just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Should I get the heck out of Dodge? What am I doing here? So we really had to calm it down. I'm gonna sort of flip it over to Jennifer to do another one, but I just want you to think about that. That is the very first session. We can begin to practice. I mean, hopefully not all of your clients come in like that, right? But it's a perfect opportunity to talk about what we're doing and why, so that then she knows every time this is part of our work, right? The psychoeducation that Jennifer mentioned with her first client, that's part of it.
That's so perfect, Ashley. And as you were talking about sort of the evolution of what we've done in psychotherapy in our 26 whatever years, it is interesting. You're absolutely right. In the past, I p I can tell you as an early clinician, I would think, "Okay, I've gotta do what intervention am I doing? I've gotta do those evidence-based interventions." And whenever you would speak with colleagues that had more experience, if you were to talk about doing any sort of, um, breathing exercises, it was not considered an necessarily an evidence-based, approach, unless specifically you're working on some CBT modalities. It just wasn't looked at, right? Uh, the same. And I too would go right into what am I going to be doing, missing that opportunity for my client to really receive it. So, dual awareness is a different approach where we now are able to get our clients in their body where they're able to receive that spiel. They're able to receive the intervention, that they're able to feel safe. And what happens in dual awareness is that we're able to have two distinct experiences at the exact same time and hold them together. So being able to go back into our previous emotional experiences, while right now in the moment of safety and in that nice therapeutic space, sit within my window of tolerance while also remembering that piece. So, what these exercises do is it helps our clients to stay grounded. It helps them from becoming overwhelmed by past experiences. In mindfulness, we call it equanimity. This is what we call dual awareness, that we're able to stay within our window of tolerance and go, that was a bad experience. That was a negative experience, but I'm still here. And right now I'm safe. Right now I'm okay. And so when we're able to do this, it will help to process the trauma and it helps to actually integrate it. And that's what we want. We want that integration of the past and the present. And when we integrate both the past and the present, it reduces that nervous system reactivity. So, how do we do that? We do it through various exercises. We can promote mindfulness of just being right here, right now, grounding yourself into this space, and just being aware of what that feels like. And so, our goal is to make sure that we're doing this and helping that process, helping them to understand both of those. And a key component, as Ashley said, is telling your client what you're doing and why it helps. So let's go to that next piece, and I'll just show you where this sort of showed up with a client of mine. So I'll call her Sarah, 32 years old, and she came in with a history of childhood emotional neglect. And when we started talking, um, what I found is that she would often feel overwhelmed when she was talking about her past trauma, right? Um, Especially when she talked about her mom and that her mom was very emotionally distant. And so what I did was I started to see how things were showing up in her body when she talked about that. I would notice as she would start to talk about her mom, you would see that her body would begin to tense up. You could see it. You can hear it, right? Like as evidenced by what? How did your client appear? She would show it very quickly. Everything would shift when she talked about her mom. So what I did when working on dual awareness now, these are these exercises. So she's presenting that. We're talking about the history. We're talking about what it was like when she was growing up. I'm noticing the change in her body. And I just simply said, Sarah, I'd like you to just tune into your body for a minute and tune into your breath and just notice what's happening right now, especially when you're thinking about your mom's behavior. And just tune in, pay attention. Can you tell me what you're feeling? Can you tell me what you're feeling anywhere within your body? She was able to absolutely recognize the tension in her chest, shortness of the breath, but she was also able to notice, strangely, that she also felt safe when she was right there with me. And she felt safe then. And that was the aha, wonderful moment, right? She's recognizing it. She identified it. Dan Siegel says you need to name it to tame it. She named it. Oh, I'm having shortness of breath. I'm having tension in my chest. But I also feel really safe right now. So she began to recognize I feel anxious and tense when I think about my mom, but I also know I'm here in the room with you and I'm not in danger right now. So that's why I put on there that through this approach of just pausing in this moment, there's great data that happens there if we have our own therapeutic presence and we're tuned into the nervous systems in front of us and we're not so quick to go, but what technique, what do I say next? Sit, notice her, notice them in front of you. See, how are they behaving and responding when when they talk about a particular thing? Invite them to also notice and recognize. And then the more that we do that, just like Sarah did, she was able then to really acknowledge that, she can integrate the present experience while acknowledging that her past, it was the thoughts of the past that actually increased the intensity of her triggers. Oh, you're muted.
Thanks, everybody. I'm having like I have a mouse, like an actual mouse, not even my laptop's not working. So it's embarrassing to mention that I have a mouse because it's not 1992 or whatever, but I do. And so it's racing me through some of the slides. So I apologize. Thanks, Jennifer. And so, it's interesting as I'm listening to Jennifer and I was sort of thinking about what we've been saying, I don't think we put it in these slides, but right now it should be a screen that just says, slow it down, because that's part of what we're saying here, right? Part of what we're saying about like what's really important about helping our clients engage in these neural exercises, like almost everything about this is about helping them slow the process down. We're slowing it down, they're slowing it down so they can really engage these things. So thinking about sort of what we're saying, but also in terms of the activities we're talking about, but these activities or these neural exercises, they're not like, okay, quick, got it down. They're meant to be used with intention, purpose, the who, what, where, why, and how do I do this? So just wanted to sort of add that because as I'm sort of, I think as we're always doing, we're sort of thinking about whenever I hear somebody talk about it or say something again, I get something new from it. So that was just what was coming to me. And I want to go into the next neural exercise that we're talking about, right? So we've talked about just the ability to be safe in this room with this in therapy to begin the work so that then I can move on with my therapist to begin to do the healing work of dual awareness, right? Beginning to recognize the past is the past. It can't hurt me now. I'm safe in this present moment. That's so critical to this work. And I think a lot of the slowing it down is this whole entire webinar is about resourcing. If you're an EMDR therapist, you'd think of it as the resourcing phase. For other people, it's sort of like building safety and stability to do the work. But this safety and stability work is healing. And that was such an epiphany to me when I was taught it in these various ways. And when it finally like landed for me, like, oh, some trauma is actually resolved in the building of these coping skills, building this coping capacity, building the capacity to self-regulate, to be self-aware, and then regulate in response to current stress, obviously future stress, and even things that happened before. I used to not be able to tolerate it. Now I can. So even sometimes when reprocessing or sort of memory reconsolidation or whatever folks call it is not an option for any range of reasons, this is healing work. And so this particular activity that we're going to talk about here is really interesting. Jennifer said something really beautiful about how trauma shapes relationships. And I think a lot as we think about attachment, right? Trauma shapes relationships, our relationship to ourselves and our relationship to others. And so as we think about this, it really affects all of what we're doing in the world. And so these neural exercises can be used really intentionally to build or strengthen neural pathways associated with attachment-related needs that maybe never got met in childhood, or that I need more of, or that I see that something's going on. And Jen mentioned secure attachment, that even if I didn't have secure attachment, I can build it now in this therapeutic relationship, in this corrective emotional experience through this work. And one of the ways we help do that is we can do that in lots of ways. One of the really creative ways that I've heard folks talk about, different leaders in the field talk about in different ways, is pairing sort of meditation, guided imagery, depends on what the person needs, how easily they can call up images in their mind, visualizations, um, pulling this up and then pairing it with lots of different things. Maybe it's bilateral stimulation. So those of you who do the slow butterfly tap, or sometimes you might want to pair it with an expressive art activity. It could be with painting or drawing or journaling. So the idea is what we're sort of talking about. There's lots of different ways, but what we want to do here is really think about how we would build some of these sort of attachment, I guess, enhance these secure attachments later in life, even if we didn't get them when we were younger. This is an example of Janina. She is 54. She was raised by a single mother who was chronically depressed and emotionally absent during Janina's childhood and teen years. Janina is also a single mom who raised her two children, now 26 and 22. She talks about doing things really, really different for her children. That was so important. She showed them what she called fierce love and really tried to be the mom she didn't have. She's really close with both of them still. What she talks about is the struggles she has in work relationships, both with bosses and coworkers, in friendships, and in lots of romantic relationships, inability to sort of sustain them for a range of reasons. And so we started to sort of talk about and think about how this was related to some of her many of her unmet attachment needs with her mom. And so we started to, there's lots of work around this, but one activity we did was aimed at feelings, building feelings of being loved and cared for. And I love this person named Dr. Laurel Parnell, who does this attachment focused EMDR and a range of other things. But what I love about her work is that she talks about the ways in which, and I think she cites Dan Siegel a lot in her work, the ways in which you can bring up sort of in your mind's eye through meditation and imagery, these sort of images or visualizations of, and she often talks about different options, but ideal mother, ideal father, or other versions of love. In this case, a lot of times what she will say is what you can do is you can bring up, since Janina didn't have a really good experience, she's not bringing up her past experience from her childhood. It didn't exist. Instead, she's tuning first into her own capacity to love. And so as she is bringing up for herself her capacity to fiercely love her children and pulling that up, right? Tuning into it, the feelings, the sensations, the lift in her chest, the way her body feels when she gives that and senses that fierce love. So first we're calling that up and either tapping it in. That's what I like to do. But some people really like to color it in. Clients think about lots of colors or pictures. It just depends. Right? So really, really making it so present, not a quick thing, very present. Then we were able to move on to when she could conjure up that feeling, imagining for herself that kind of love when she was little Janina, that if Janina could have benefited from that kind of love. And so even though she didn't, she is sensing it. So she's imagining in her mind's eye, little Janina, 2 years old, 7 years old, 13, and getting the kind of love she gives. And she's able to do that. She brings it up and feels what it's like to feel it on the receiving end as well. And then she taps it in. And guess what? That creates that neural pathway that she did not have before. It builds this new neural pathway. And she practices and practices and practices in different ways and begins to strengthen something that did not exist for her. And so sometimes people talk about attachment wounds that people don't have a memory of. So you might not have experienced something, or you might not know, and you can still heal using this amazing resource that we now call neuroplasticity, neuroflexibility, and integrate it into therapy in ways that make sense. The last neural exercise we're going to talk about with respect to a case study is this idea of a lot of times what happens for clients is we are really working on addressing attachment wounds that are related to sort of, when we felt really helpless, right? Learned helplessness. And we know this is a key hallmark of lots of trauma. I was helpless and I learned to believe I'd always be helpless, or a part of me did, or my nervous system did, right? And what it can look like, what you might notice it like in the way you see your clients, or really the way they see themselves. Hopefully we can see beyond it. They might call it low motivation, they might call it not trying or laziness. They might see themselves in this light. We might start to say, oh, they don't take advantage of opportunities, or they don't want help. We might see this. And what's really going on is they're really stuck. They're often stuck in the feelings, beliefs, the nervous system states, or bodily patterns that keep them in that immobilized state that Jennifer talked about, the window of tolerance, right? Keep them immobilized. And these clients often are so stuck in that space of despair, of feeling incapacitated, they can no longer remember, recognize, see, or feel their own experiences of resilience or efficacy, strength, success. So we then, again, all of our clients as strength-based social workers or practitioners, that all of us, no matter probably when we practice, we learned that, right? When we went to school, we know that. This is capitalizing on this old knowledge and bringing it into 2024. We will help our clients create this sense of sort of strength and resilience by using their neural networks, right? So here's a client I have, James, who was really severely bullied in schools by peers. The teachers were complicit, and his father sort of blamed him for a lot of this in school, made him feel very small, very stupid, very much like a disappointment to his dad, and really just sort of a failure to fit in, to belong, to be anything useful. He dropped out of college about 5 years ago, been working from home. He describes his life right now as really sort of miserable, unfulfilled, and he's really worried that he's financially unstable and always will be. He feels like it's time to adult, but just has been stuck for a really long time. So the goal is to push past his intense fears of sort of failure, rejection, all of these doubts that keep him frozen, because he wants to move into graphic design, which I can see it's sort of where he's meant to be, and he'll be amazing. So what we have done and continue to do is use imagery to help him tap into past memories and experiences of times when he was successful. There have been successful at anything. When he finds these feeling words and these felt sensations in his body in the same way we talked about it, we again use the BLS to strengthen the connections. We have also written them on by we, he has, I've invited him to do so, and he has written them on yellow Post-it notes, well, all color, and really put them all around the room. So he has written these experiences and the feeling words, these reminders, all around his computer desk and all around his mirror, so that he is noticing them, because his default is always to go to small, stupid disappointment. Those sadly are the neural pathways that have been strengthened in his life. We are working on really giving less attention to those and giving much more attention to all the ways in which he is so resilient, so creative, so resourceful, so capable, and all those things. And so he came up with this language. He came up with the words. He put them on the Post-its. He notices them, and he is working on not just noticing, but noticing and noticing what it feels like to hear those words, to read them to himself, to feel the felt sense of being capable. And then he often taps it in. We've practiced tapping in session, and then he does it on his own. So that's the last case example. And now Jennifer is going to lead you through a little practice of our own, lead us all through it.
Thanks, Ashley. So, yeah, so let's just shift now for a moment. I'm recognizing how much time we have left here, but I want to give us all an opportunity to just practice. because we can create that environment for our clients to help them to feel empowered, right? To help them to make better choices and decisions. So let's just do a brief experiential practice now where you can adapt this and you can use this to um, help your clients enhance their locus of control. So let's first just start by getting grounded and just find a comfortable position. And just take a nice, slow breath in your nose and exhale through your mouth. And just do that again. Inhale, hold, exhale. And just do that one more time. Inhale, hold, exhale. Good. And feel your feet on the floor and just notice the support of your chair and let yourself settle into this moment. There's nowhere to go, no place to be except right here, right now. Now, I want you to bring to your mind a time when you felt empowered, when you knew that you had competence, strength to meet a challenge. And this could be something big or small, it could be personal or professional. Just bring to your mind that. It might be completing a difficult task or advocating for someone, learning a new skill. Just take a moment. Now, picture yourself in that moment. And I want you to notice the details. Where where are you? What are you doing? And notice how you feel that in your body. Notice that feeling when that was happening. Perhaps there was a sense of confidence or energy. Just take a moment to connect with the feeling. Notice where it resides in your body, in your chest, in your hands, maybe in your posture. Now, I want you to amplify that feeling. And imagine it growing stronger and stronger, really like a light radiating outward. And allow that sense of empowerment to fill your entire body and mind. Really feel it. And when you're ready, I want you to just reflect and think about how that memory of empowerment can support you right now in your work, right now in your personal life. Just think about what are the qualities or strengths that you embodied in that moment that you can bring forward and draw upon today. Resilience, resourcefulness, perseverance, determination, and just let that sense of what I'll call agency anchor you in that moment, in this moment. And when you're ready, take another slow, deep breath and gently bring your awareness back to this room. And if you were able to be there and to experience it and feel it, think about how that exercise or something similar might actually help your clients. So just think about that for a moment because this is a way that we can enhance our locus of control. This is a way that we can foster resilience by allowing our clients to connect to empowering memories if they've had them. and help them anchor into a sense of safety and self-efficacy. That's deeply neurobiological.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. I did it, I felt it, and I got an overwhelming sense of relief. So
Wow.
thank you. I hope others felt something. I needed relief right now. This is a time in the world where I think relief is a welcome feeling. So thank you. And if here's our last couple slides, folks, bear with us.
Yeah.
And want to do this one, Jen? Yeah.
Yeah. So uh, let's just do a quick recap of what we've gone over today, right? Just some of the takeaways that we wanted for you folks to have is just understanding and integrating interpersonal neurobiology, that using this information and using this as a foundation can help us to understand our clients and help them to foster resilience and help us to help our clients to heal. Understanding trauma in the nervous system, understand and recognize trauma's impact, and that we can provide a different kind of intervention that helps our clients to restore that safety, to feel that connection, and to feel that regulation in the nervous system. Understand neuroplasticity and use these exercises, these neural exercises, to create and to reinforce positive neural pathways. We want to build up the positive and hopefully encourage your clients to do this daily. Maybe you do this daily. Grounding, resourcing, affirmations, all of those things, guided visualization, and that practice and repetition are key. You got to build that neural pathway. So thank you, folks. Thank you for joining us. So we went a minute over, but we really appreciate you joining us and helping understand how we can help clients integrate trauma through these trauma focused interventions. There's just a quicker and better way to help our clients heal, and it's just ongoing. So thank you for being there with us. Join us in the new year as we will have a new series of webinars. And so if you'd like to find out more, you can go to that website. We'll also provide tip sheets and resources for learning more about each webinar. So thank you folks so much.
All of our last four are up and loaded on our page. So if this is your first one, visit the previous recordings, and we look forward to bringing you more. So thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks. Bye-bye.